First one of the morning, guys. Ned rig. That's what we're doing. Here's the first one of the morning. There you go. That's probably an 18, I'd say. 18-inch largemouth right there. First one. Get her back. Get good and splashed. And we'll talk about where that fish bit after I get my rod all pulled out and good. Back off where I'm fishing a little bit first too. Alright, so good morning, guys. It is Nick Molbauer here again. I don't know if I said that because I'm usually pretty caught up in what I'm doing when I catch a fish. So I apologize if I said that once already, but that first one came off the famous Ned rig. As Seth Fighter calls it, just a turd. That's about what it is. So these are the Z-Man El Aztec. And they're kind of beat up. If I were gonna say one thing I don't like about these El Aztec Ned rigs is don't leave them in your car. You know, you get temperatures in your car in the 100 degrees, you know, car heats up, they'll melt. They'll definitely melt. So I'd say that fish bit about 7 foot deep. We're on a point again, and we're just kind of fishing. Like I said, we're starting shallow and fishing out to deep water. Okay, and I generally fish out to I don't know, anywhere between, unless I dial them, like 12-14 feet, or anywhere from 15 to 20 feet off the point, just to figure out where they're hanging out. That fish was on bottom, you know, fishing it just like I was fishing my 4-inch the other day. So that fish told me it was sitting probably at about 6 or 7 foot, so maybe we can expect to find more fish sitting at 6 or 7 feet. So off this point, a good break over here, more mellow break here, lots of depth variations, some good coarse rock in here. They love holding up on that coarse rock, so if you can find coarse rock, you know, that's the ticket. If you don't have electronics, you know, just use your jig head and kind of, you can feel it. You just roll bottom and you can feel, there's a hang up, you can feel those coarse rocks. Okay, so we'll just keep fishing this Ned. I also have on a 4-inch Berkley minnow, power bait minnow, and we're just gonna throw them around. Again, I only have like an hour and a half again today, so I've been struggling to get out for a decent amount of time lately. It's been about a month since I've been able to fish for more than an hour and a half, so I'll probably have to pull this Ned rig out. Hopefully it'll just come out, but it doesn't feel like it. That's the one other downside to Ned rigs. They're hard to, even if you roll it slow, you'll get them hung up. So I'll save my breath, keep fishing, put on another one, and see if we can catch another. There's fish number 2, guys, off of a lay down coming into the water. You can see another one leaving over there. There's a little fella. And I changed my mind. I was like, maybe I'll just fish a Neko rig instead of a Ned rig, just because I thought maybe I could, you know, get less hang-ups. And you know, that's just your, if you don't know what a Neko rig is, it's just a worm on a nail. I have a nail weight in there on the tail. And see how we have this tree coming down here? So those branches are coming out into the water, and I'm in 4 foot of water right now. We got some deep water out there, so I think it makes it enticing for bass to come in and hang out off of these trees here. And that's why that bass was there. I just threw it up in there, parallel, walked it out to a couple feet of water, 4 feet of water, 3-4 feet of water, and that fish was just sitting right up on there. Right up on those limbs coming out into the water. On really calm days like this, you can really read the water well, because you can see fish traveling the shallows. You can see the V. So I saw a couple fish just kind of meandering. I didn't know if they were bass or carp, but you know, bass like to hang out on this stuff. So I was like, I'll give it a try. It's close to deep water. Maybe there'll be a bass set up on there, and there you go. I think there were some bigger ones set up on there too, but didn't get the bite that time. But anytime you see a little weird nuance or quirkiness on the water, something that just looks a little different, like something's alive down there, I pitch at that stuff, and sometimes I get bit. Never hurt. Use your intuition. There's another one. That fish is in probably a foot of water there, guys. Another little guy, but you know, you never know. It could just as easily be a larger fish set up on that stuff. And that fish really took down that hook, so it must have landed darn near on that fish's head. So that's 3, you know. I've been fishing, oh, probably a half hour now, and that's 3 bass. Got it in pretty good. There we go. So those are dinks, you know, they're nothing special at all, but it's still fun pulling them out of that thin stuff, you know, that thin skinny water, you know. And it, you know, it's showing that, you know, I've been fishing these spots for the duration of summer, you know, a couple of these spots, and they weren't holding fish other days, so it makes me wonder if they're going to start doing more fall transition. I remember telling you guys I've been fishing shallow cover near hard breaks. Once fall comes around, they'll start getting up into all the shallow cover, because that water temperature will cool down a little bit, and they won't be as particular about how close it is to deeper water. And this is all my opinion. These are just things that I've kind of learned as I have fished, you know. But once fall comes around, any little bit of cover up in the skinniest water will hold fish. Very likely. It's very possible. There's another one. Flipped him right out of the water, but you know, bass are hanging shallow, guys, on worms. The old Nico rig. One of these times it's going to be a dinger too. Be another 5-pounder, or 4-pounder, 3 to 5 pounder, 2 to 5, 2 to 4. Little fella. It's still a lot of fun. Just working that shallow cover, guys. There we go, guys. There's a good one shallow, I think. Well, definitely a mangy character, scrappy. There's some root balls up there. We'll fight this fish in. Second good one. There's a good one, guys. Making 2 feet of water his home. Four-inch Berkley minnow, ball head jig. There we go. There's the second good one of the day, folks. We'll get that one back. Beautiful fish. and that fish was up on those root balls. So we got a tree coming into the water here, and that tree's roots go out into the water, but what those fish like to do is they like to tuck themselves up under that root. So I was just fishing that Berkley minnow parallel to those roots, and really I always say, like, you can get that stuff as close into there as you'd like. Like, they're up under there on the cut bank, where the roots in the cut bank are, is where those fish like to set up, but they're also cruising. Like I mentioned in my last video, they'll cruise that stuff for bait, and that fish came out of there. Water up here is, I don't know, probably about a foot or two of water. That was another nice fish. Smoked the owner ballhead jig. I rolled that jig through there probably 3-4 times before I got bit. So there you go. Shallow cover, big fish, boom.
Hey, good morning guys, it's Nick Mulbauer here this morning, and we are going to recap the trip from a week ago. That was another short hour-and-a-half trip, and I think I ended up with 6 bass in an hour and a half. It was an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes tops was the length of that trip. So not a bad trip, you know. Got into a couple fishing points, breaks, and shallow cover. Okay, I'll start with that first fish. That first fish was set up on a point. Okay, I could fish a point all day, probably just one point. If it had enough things going for it, I could fish a point all day. That point I was fishing has a lot of things going for it, and if I had more time again that day, I would have sat there and tried more stuff. I ended up pitching a Ned rig, like you saw. I got that first one on, and then in the video you saw I got that Ned rig hung up. So I pulled it out. I was about ready to put on another Ned rig. I would have loved to fish another Ned rig, but I was like, I don't have a lot of time again. I don't want to get Ned rigs hung up because I don't have any weedless Ned rigs. I don't know if I've ever even looked for a weedless Ned rig, but I'm sure they exist. So I ditched the Ned rig purely because I thought fishing a Nico rig would be more weedless, or it'd be less likely to get hung up on the coarse rock that is on that point. So I fished that point a little while longer with the Nico rig. Didn't catch anything. I did get hung up, but I was able to pull it out. So fished that point a while. And then I also threw the 4-inch Berkley minnow for a while there. I just wasn't getting bit. I fished probably 0 to probably 8-9 foot range, and you know, and like I said, there's a lot of depth changes on that point. Maybe a few times I'd fish it down to 11, but you know, had I had more time, I probably would have fished that deeper water a little more thoroughly. But yeah, just for sake of time, I ditched that point and I moved up shallow. Just off that point, there's some shallow laydowns that are just kind of right off that point to the south, and I fished those. And yeah, there were a couple fish obviously set up on it. You saw me catch about 3 in a row there, so nothing big, but sometimes there's some big ones in that stuff too. And there could have very well still been a big one, and I just couldn't coax it to bite. I did see some V's leave. Like I said, it was a really calm day, and you can really read the water on those calm days. And I saw a couple things kind of get out of there. I did get that Nico rig also hung up in that laydown, I think one time, and you know, I had to go pull it out, and I spooked some stuff, spooked some fish out of there. So caught 3, and there were even more set up in there. Couldn't tell you if they were bass, you know, but I bet you they were bass set up on there. And it's just a matter of figuring out how to get those big smart ones to bite. So yeah, you know, you can fish a lot of different things this time of year. I think you just, based on water clarity, you want to have some, you know, natural presentations, but I've also read and heard that it's a good time to downsize your presentation. I'm fishing a 4-inch swim bait, and that's actually like, or 4-inch soft plastic swim bait, and I'm a finesse guy. Like, that's just the way I am. That's just how I enjoy fishing. So you know, I can't speak more as much to power fishing at all, but a A 4-inch Berkeley minnow is actually like kind of on the top end of the size of lures I fish for swim baits, especially for that profile. You know, I think I could go bigger, but that profile doesn't have a paddle tail or anything. So even though it's a 4-inch swim bait, it runs through that water pretty quiet, and I think it runs really well for water that has clarity. That's, you know, and obviously there's changes and there's tons of stuff you can get into there, but I just think it's a good bait for water that's in that 2 to 4 foot range that I'm fishing. I think you know, bottom end 18 inches of clarity is what I'm fishing, that 4-inch, and I think they can see it, but it also looks pretty natural going through the water there, even in the shallower stuff. You just kind of work it different. You either want to, you know, if you feel like it's in that shallow water and those lures are more visible, you might want to work it a little faster so that you're getting more of a reaction strike than an eating strike. I feel like in that deeper water where, you know, those lures are less visible, the bass could be reacting to it, or they could also actually be, you know, chowing down on that stuff. So yeah, shallow cover fishing, any worm or jig and trailer, any sort of small plastic swim bait, you're gonna get bit. Like, you know, obviously the bigger the bait, you know, you kind of sacrifice probably bites for bigs, you know. So you put a smaller swim bait on there, you're probably gonna get bit more, and you're probably gonna catch more fish, but the quality might go down a little bit. Whereas you put a bigger bait on, probably not going to get as many bites, but they might be those big bites that you're looking for. Where do we go from here? Oh, I kind of want to talk about water clarity just a little bit. So I think it's really important to downsize, like I said, but another thing you want to consider is clarity. So downsizing is great, but like if you have clarity that's really poor, I think it's maybe more important to think about having a larger bait, because that fish can't see it. You know, you want to have something that kind of telegraphs itself a little bit more in the water. So even though I think if you have pretty decent clarity, anything from 18 inches, 2 foot plus, I think you can really use that downsizing to your advantage. But if you have clarity that's below that 18 inches range, I would consider using a bait that's more obnoxious. I've been using a lot of soft plastics, like I said, because that's my comfort zone. I also have the clarity for it, but if the clarity was really bad, I would definitely be upsizing those baits, putting on some really bright baits, putting on some really dark black baits, or putting on baits that have more action, more vibration, just anything to draw those fish in from a distance. Like I said, I've not had to fish that because the clarity in my body of water has maintained itself pretty well this year. It's not gone through many changes. There was a couple dirty times, but not insanely dirty. It wasn't like you got chocolate milk colored or anything. So another thing to consider, but yeah, I think if you just fish those points in that shallow cover with a bait that, you know, has a natural look in water that has a 2+ feet of clarity, and then fish those same areas if you have really dirty water, but with maybe like a larger bait or a bait that you know, just can draw fish from further away, because they're using different senses to find a bite to eat, you know, rather than sight. So but all that being said, we haven't had a lot of rain here in central Iowa recently, so I bet a lot of the lakes are, you know, have that 18+ inch clarity here in Iowa. So I think you could get away with those small swim baits, small cranks, jigs, worms, you know. So fish those, fish the points, fish that shallow cover, get that lure up into that shallow cover as good as you can. Like I've said 1,000 times, you cannot throw too close to that stuff. Just figure out a way to get it in there and not get hung up, you know. Find a lure that can get into that gnarly cover but can also be pulled out easily, and hopefully can be pulled out from a distance pretty easy, so that you have to go up into that cover and startle something that might be what you're targeting. So I'm gonna end it there. Y'all take care, and I'll be back out this weekend. I'm not certain if I'm going to be pan fishing or bass fishing. I have a plan for either or both, so we'll just see. I'm kind of aching for a fish fry. You know, I've not kept any stringers of crappie or bluegill this year, and I think a fish fry sound kind of good. So maybe I'll go get some panfish, or we're gonna get back on some bass and see if we can catch some good ones either way. You know, so y'all take care. I'll see you later. Bye, guys.